Happy Sunday and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be getting into those shorter time frames, getting you guys updated weekly and daily expected moves for the week to come. And we do put out daily expected moves for the SPY and the QQQ every single day on YouTube if you want to come back here for those daily expected moves. These expected moves are 68% zones that are calculated using the options data, and that's something that I had to look at this morning, and this is why I do the Sunday calculation, because there was a slight mistake in the monthly expected moves. So I want you guys to update those right now. I believe we had a higher up monthly expected moves because we had less days to expiration. Hey, I'm human and I forgot to change the days to expiration because we actually have more days to expiration in March than we did in February. So just make sure that that is fixed on your screen here, 6/18/28 to the upside. So the stories that we were talking about in yesterday's video have not changed, but now we see how that 620 level can be resistance. And then to the downside, we do see 570.08 originally at the lower end of this, now moving slightly to the upside when updated. This is why it's always good to double check your monthly or weekly expected moves if you are doing your own calculation back to back over the weekend. So this is a good time. Usually Sunday morning is when I make them, and this is what I would suggest. So this is your 68% zone for the month of March. And let's get into those shorter time frames. As we get weekly expected moves, we can look into what things can happen this week, and let's just get right into it right now with the SPY. So even though we do have these signals that say we could be heading into some kind of bear market, we could be heading into some kind of crash, well, we were just going to be aware if there were reversal signals that set up. And as this 2 hour got deeper and deeper and we went down and down and down and we break through the channel, we wanted to see if anything showed up for us to turn this 2 hour back to the upside. And we do see that now. We do see confirmation of that at the end of the day. Remember that this last bar isn't the best confirmation bar, but that is some strength coming in, and the actual confirmation that I was waiting for was the 30-minute chart. The 30-minute chart one time had a management of the trade right in here, but still held the divergences, right? Still held the divergence all the way from this point to these lows. You had those divergence points. And so this is when we really want to pay attention, right? It's by a weekly, well, this is next week's weekly expected move, but the reason you want to pay attention here is because you didn't necessarily have the best reversal signals on this. So this one was a, yeah, I'm going to take that, but if this starts to unconfirm, this could be a bad sign. And then we tried to make a higher low and unconfirmed. So this bar right here should technically tell us like, hey, management of the trade is necessary. But now we have actually held those divergence points, which says that that 2 hour move could take us up to the upside weekly expected move. We want to see if this happens early on in the week. Okay, so for the 30-minute for Monday, though, we can see that the most likely area we are going to go test is at 598.75 to the upside, and then you have 589.61 to the downside. But look where that 598.75 is. If we see this extend up to these areas, people could get bearish again if we see a downturn, but then we actually see this left head and right shoulder form for the SPY, and I think that would be the best way for it to head higher. But ultimately, the 2 hour is going to curl up here. Now, the positioning of the 2 hour MACD right now is suggesting that an upside move could actually fail, and we might need to make this a stronger base by getting some kind of upside move and then coming down to lower levels to really solidify like, hey, we do have some form of divergence down here for the daily MACD to go to new all-time highs, right? This is overall with how these weekly expected moves are standing. If we do not V-shape and we do see resistance come in for that 2 hour, this would be the only real way that I see the market able to go higher, and that's if it does some kind of thing that's positive, right? Confirms this as a strong 2 hour base. This currently is only a strong 30-minute base, which can have a 2 hour move, but usually you need to see some kind of 2 hour base to actually get a daily move to take you through to new all-time highs. So as this 2 hour does curl up, I want to be open to lower highs. I want to be open to possibility for even higher lows. Okay, we will be watching for those things. If we do consolidate in these areas and we see that break to the upside, this would be a great level to retest to actually break through. So you are going to need the SPY to either make some higher lows, or you're going to need it to form that strong base with the 2 hour coming down to lower levels, going for almost the triple dip at this point for the 2 hour. So these are the things that I'm paying attention attention to. It really looks like we're basing out as of Friday on the 30-minute, but is that a strong enough base to take us to 620? Is that a strong enough base just to get a 2-hour move, and then we reject and we turn down and everyone's caught off guard? So we will be paying attention to these things for you, updating you all week long, and we will be live every single morning this week. So make sure you're subscribed and tune in. And if you recall, it was the Qs that actually went down to a monthly expected move, right? We actually saw that tag of the monthly expected move downside, which is very, very cool. But these have updated as well, just so you're aware that mistake was happening with the Qs as well. So make sure you get it on your chart, 537.89 to the upside and 478.45 to the downside for your monthly expected moves for March for the Qs. Now the Qs in these areas, does the change in the calculation really change how we think about things? Not necessarily at this moment. We see that 537.89, right? We were up at these levels with that old calculation. So the new calculation actually just telling us even more so we should watch out for possibly even a lower high here, even if the daily chart's able to confirm up for a second. It could just see that resistance come in right away. We could get some kind of divergence point right away. So these are things that I'm watching at this moment, but you need some weekly expected moves. Look at the 2-hour positioning, hasn't even curled up yet, so we could see a decent sized 2-hour move, but that has the ability to potentially be a dead cat bounce, right? If this is going to be bear market time, right? If we start to do bear market behavior, which this slightly is at this moment, then we might see that 2-hour move up, and it might look strong. It might even look like a V shape, and then we just reject and head to the lower side. So just be aware that you have some things that other people don't. If you're watching this video, you have data, you have levels calculated using the options data, using people's real trades, using people's real money to actually calculate how high or low that all of these traders are suggesting that the Qs could go this week, with a 68% chance to land in this zone. So we do have 523.94 to the upside and 592.40 to the downside. Now, why is this important for our 2-hour chart? Well, because where does that topside weekly expected move land? It lands right in the area where we had previous support, right? We had support in these areas, and that's very interesting to me, because if this 2-hour just rapidly goes there, that can easily be used as resistance, and we could head all the way down to the weekly expected move and form that divergence for the Qs to actually create a 2-hour strong base, right? This is not a good 2-hour strong base. Just like the SPY, the Qs will need higher lows or some kind of divergence to really tell us like, hey, this is going to be a strong base for the daily to curl up. As of this moment, you do have daily expected moves, 513.79 to the upside, 502.55 for Monday, and you just have these 30-minute signals that are suggesting you could see a nice 2-hour move. But thankfully, we have calculated weekly expected moves, so if we get there, we know, especially early on in the week, and we will be talking about this if it happens. We will be posting it to Patreon, so a bunch of people are starting to join the Patreon for the monthly expected moves, those and the weekly expected moves for all the stocks that we do cover on this channel, and more on the right side of your screen over here will be up on Patreon. The link's in the description. It is the best time to join. You get the most value up front right friggin' now. So I'm going to post those right after this video. But I just really want everyone to be aware. This is a 30-minute base. You're going to need something very rapid to happen if you want this thing to go to new all-time highs for the Qs. And the worrisome thing for the Qs is this is just a 30-minute base. Even if we do go make a 2-hour base in some way and we curl to the upside, well, you can see that by middle of March, we might end up outside of that monthly expected move. So what these charts are overall telling me right now is the Qs are going to have a very hard time going to new all-time highs. If they do, it could be very short-lived. So even if this does end up being some kind of great upward move, we almost right away need to be paying attention to reversal signals in the month of March. So we will be watching that for you. In my opinion, I think it would be nice for this to be a little bit more complex to really fake people out and then end up seeing some upside behavior. So we'll see what happens throughout this week. We'll stay updated with it, but at this exact moment, you have a 30-minute divergence that suggests that you could see some kind of 2-hour move, and that 2-hour move might take you directly towards that topside weekly expected move for the SPY and the Qs. And this is where it's going to be very good for these individual stocks to have that. When volatility increases and we start to see some big kind of swings and we start to potentially even be going into a bear market, right? We could still go to all-time highs, but we could potentially just see a 2-hour move up and it just curls right back down. So we have to have some levels to pay attention to. And you can either hope or pray that you find a good level and you see that, or you can use options data, join the Patreon and see exactly how high everyone, and with a 68% confidence, is suggesting that the Apple could go, right? So we're just looking for that 2-hour to confirm to the upside. Say thank you to Apple because we were targeting that 250. Thank you to our weekly expected move. Right when it tagged 250, you start to have another reason for the trade, right? When you're in this area, you start to have another reason for the trade. 30-minute divergence pops up after we touch 250, then we fall. It's perfect behavior for Apple. It really is just reacting to the money moves that are happening in the market, which is fantastic. A little bit of squeeze went on right when you hit that top level of 250, you sell off, you go down to our 236.36 level where we were suggesting it needed to retest, and that's great to see that buying pressure come in. So the reason that having a new updated weekly expected moves would be great is because this is just a 30-minute divergence. Do 30-minute divergences just cause a 2-hour pullback, or do they cause the daily to turn down? Well, they're more so a 2-hour pullback. So if you want to see some kind of reversal signal, you actually might see Apple make a 2-hour move back towards 250 and then confirm some kind of divergence at these levels for that 2-hour. If we see rapid moves early on in the week, we need to be aware that there will be some kind of pullback if it's going to remain bullish to see a higher low, or we could just curl down and start to reverse this down after everyone gets a little bit bullish. At this moment, though, we can say that Apple curling up on the 2-hour, we would be looking for a tag of that 250, a test of the high, or go to make a new one, and that would be the big deal there. The 30-minute here really gave you the hint on the MACD. It is not on the RSI at the same time, but you see how sometimes those plays work, right? It's not that this isn't a reversal signal. It is. It just doesn't have that really good reason of the RSI at the same time, right? That's my favorite reason to first point out before taking a trade. This is why I was slightly looking at other things than Apple, but Apple is reacting to a great level. It needs to take back that 5. If the 30-minute does curl down, you'd be looking for that next divergence point, or possibly this to head and shoulders to the upside. But a lot of things about Apple are looking like, hey, it wants to curl up and it wants to go take a test of 250. Tesla, we see all these 30-minute divergences, we see all the rejection divergence, we see that trying to climb to the upside. This is just pretty much a squeeze to the downside, right? When we saw that Meta or JP Morgan play, they were kind of squeezing to the upside, right? Just squeezing to the upside, and they experienced a big drop. So this is almost the opposite of like JP Morgan, the Meta play that we were looking at. I can't really remember the other one off the top of my head at this moment, but we do notice that happens, right? We see that a lot of the time we can see that curl down if you can't confirm that bigger time frame up. So it still is a scenario of if the 30-minute rejects down, you can start to see bigger selling again because you are out of those oversold conditions for Tesla. But we will notice from this point forward, you start to hold all those divergences. So that means that the 2-hour has a good chance to react. But I want you to look at this 2-hour and tell me that this looks like a very, very good reversal that's going to curl up that daily chart. No, not necessarily. You have flat divergence, if not slightly down on the RSI and slightly down on the MACD. So no real divergence here for Tesla. And that tells us something huge. That tells us that if this is a lackluster move that just goes up to 327 and fails, we are very likely to go make that divergence point to confirm this is a strong base where the daily can curl up. And the other scenario would be if we can get that real big bullish move now that we can go to 357.78, we just see an absolute rip for a few days, and then we see that curl back down and give us the good structure to actually see that daily chart be able to curl up. And a good hint of all of this is if this 2-hour move is able to curl up the daily chart, that would be a big deal, right? If Tesla is able to curl up the daily chart here, it really looks like it's going to get some kind of retrace move, and the most likely thing for it is a lower high. Okay, so we do have some sort of 30-minute base, but once again, Tesla I think is a great one to keep your eye on. If it's getting here, we go, okay, maybe a lot of things will make higher lows. If it's getting to right here and failing, okay, maybe a lot of things are going to make that 2-hour base. So these are some things that we can pay attention to with Tesla. I can write them down in my booklet and be like, hey, if Tesla's going to give me a hint, I want to be paying attention, right? A lot of this is about getting an edge, right? That's what we're doing. That's why we like weekly and monthly expected moves, because they give us hard percentages of where to really look for reversal signals. At this moment for Tesla, you have everything's been updated, so you don't really have that scenario with you where you can really pay attention to those. But if you have, say, a weekly expected move here, how likely is it, do you think, that we get to 357.78? Well, if we have that information over on Patreon, we can see that 2-hour move up and know right away, like, hey, it is way more likely now for us to go see that 2-hour divergence. So this is how those things can really help you formulate those scenarios, right? Because if this is here, it's very unlikely for us to rip through it and then go like this. It just is. It can happen. It's just less likely. The more likely thing would be to tag that, see some kind of 2-hour divergence, and then we see what happens. So this is very interesting from Tesla. I like it. I think that the daily will end up curling up after all said and done. I think we will still get this upward move, but we have to understand that this could really base out in multiple different ways. Now, Amazon's already done the thing a little bit, right? Amazon's already curled up the 2-hour. Amazon's already seen that rejection on the 30-minute from this type of area, and Amazon has already tried to curl back up. So something key here will be we need to get through that 213.52 to the upside. We need to get through this. We need to get through that 217.50 area. That would be very, very good, and that would maybe even curl up our daily chart at that point. So what do we want to see from the 30-minute? And this is why this can be considered a higher low, is because you didn't go past these levels and you were at a lower point in the MACD. You curl up into positive territory, you curl slightly down, but this time you're closer to the center line. So this move can be a little bit better. And then we can just use that 5 to keep heading to the upside for Amazon. So we will be paying attention to this, but Amazon doing a nice thing, able to curl up, able to curl down, give you that higher low, even showing some stuff here on the 2-hour, actually able to confirm up and then reject. So Amazon could be seeing that move to the upside very soon. Sorry about that. You know I hiccup every video. Now, the one thing I'd be watching here is if we're going to end up in this zone. Well, if we're going to end up in this zone, we're probably going to see that rejection off of the 5-day, that blue staggered line coming down. That's where we retrace to a lot of the time for those retests, like in here. So if we're going to reject off of this, I'd just be watching my 30-minute. If we just curl this thing right back down, we start to chop this low, I think it's very likely we end up down by that 200 price point for Amazon. Nvidia, kind of an extended signal, but you do see it. You do see the 30-minute divergence. We do potentially have those weekly expected moves from last week, but they have just been updated, right? And this is a 30-minute divergence where you still want to be aware if that rejects off the 5. Because it's not like extremely close to the center line, this can do something like this before it actually wants to curl up on your MACD. So we can see like one more little curl down, one more little curl down before that actually happens. So it's just something to be aware of, right? We want to be taking back that 5, but this is 30-minute divergence. You see it on the MACD, you see it on the RSI at the same time, right? You see that RSI pointing in that upward direction while the price action is coming down. So you want to be retaking that 125, and thankfully our levels have called this really well, right? The retest of 125 failed, we go down, or 135 failed, and then we go down to 125. Then we see that test, and then we go right back up to 135, and we go down to 125. We try to bounce from that level, we fall down, create the divergence to get you nice and bearish, and then this signal likes to curl up 2-hour charts. Now this 2-hour is still a little deep. We want to pay attention to if there is rejection at any time, but if this can really see a positive move and then curl back down, maybe using that 125 again, you can see a slight head and shoulders that could form here. And ultimately what you're looking for from Nvidia is the daily chart to curl up. The daily chart curling up here would say, hey, I am a higher low. The daily chart curling up here would say, I might even play out this slanted head and shoulders we got going on, where we could see a potential move that goes to the upside. And yeah, you can use a measured move, you can do all that good stuff, but if you're trying to trade in the month of March, maybe having a monthly expected move would help you a lot more, right? Because if we have a monthly expected move right here, and then we actually see this break to the upside, and we don't see anything crazy, right? We're using that to go higher. Well, we could just get to that point, reject, maybe even retest, set up a reversal signal, and then fall back down. So just be aware of the scenarios that could happen around your monthly expected moves. And that's why Patreon is such a good thing right now, right? These are things that I've utilized for years now, and they've really helped out my trading. And it's fine. It's $7 a month. There's no lockdown, anything like that. Like, you can get out anytime you want, right? It's just $7 to potentially get data that can really help out your trading and completely change how you view the market at this point. But for Nvidia, you need the daily scale to turn up and hold and break through resistance and break through potentially a monthly expected move to continue in the upward direction and make new all-time highs. And this is what is interesting and why we could see that V shape that just sees a rapid move all of a sudden, is because stocks like Amazon, stocks like Meta, they do have these 2 hours that have curled up and curled back down to give you that higher low. Now, we still want to pay attention if that's just an extended move that then fails, right? If that fails, we might go make that base a little bit lower. Remember, we were targeting that 617.82. We could still end up there for Meta, even with an upward move. This is something about, like, if this is going to behave like a bear market, we would see a 2-hour rip here, and then that would just fail once it tags a weekly or monthly expected move. That's what happens a lot of the time in bear markets, and that's why you need those levels. And I'm just pushing that today because when things get volatile, people have a hard time finding those support and resistances. And I'm just telling you right now, the only support and resistances that I fully trust are those weekly expected moves each week and the monthly expected moves each month. So they really help me out. But I just want to show you that that's a 2-hour almost rejection there, suggesting that this could be a higher low. So if we're able to see some kind of great move here, maybe to get to 620 before we see resistance come in, that would be good. But if we just see an equal move, I'm not going to be happy about that. And if you have weekly expected moves, maybe you can tell where that is. But you see how if we get that equal type of move here, we could extend up a little bit and then just cross down and make that stronger 2-hour base later on. So just be aware of those type of scenarios, and we'll be finding out. Ultimately, the goal here for Meta is to try to curl up on a daily chart at the end of this, because you don't have the best reversal signals. So we'll see if that is going to try to curl up and reject. That would be not the best thing. Or is that going to actually curl up and give us that divergence point? I still think Meta would be a great one to have on my radar if we go to new all-time highs, to see if that is actually forming any reversal signals at this point. To go deeper into the 30-minute, just so you're aware, this is where you can just view how this is trying to be a higher low. You can see how we're taking back the 5. But the reason that this is better, right? The reason that we like, stocks that are in this area and seeing that curl up to take out these levels is more because we are closer to the center line. This is made very clear in the course. That's down in the description, the full technical analysis course, but we'll talk about that further on in the month. This is just where you really want to be paying attention, because closer to the center line means closer to going positive, going into a positive trend, and that's what we're looking for the 30-minute for Meta at this point. And we can pay attention to this week's weekly expected moves to see when that resistance is actually going to come in. Microsoft, a little bit complex, but it is there, and we see that the 30-minute divergence was able to hold the first point, not the second one. So this is not like the best reversal signal, where it's a decent one, right? It's a decent one, but this can cause 2-hour moves to the upside. We can start to potentially even take back the 5. We're crossing that 50 line on the RSI. Like, this doesn't look horrible. And then we see this 2-hour and we go, oh, there's divergence on the MACD, but not on the RSI at all at the same time. Okay, so we need to treat this still like it might need to make those higher lows, or even fail those moves and make some kind of 2-hour divergence, right? If this is going to behave like a bear market, we could literally see rip downs like this and form that divergence very, very fast to the downside, even after heading in the upward direction. So ultimately for this, I mean, if this is going to be some kind of like squeeze for a bit, then that 2-hour just bad looking, like not the best looking divergence could actually produce some positivity. But the positioning of the daily MACD suggests suggest even if we get that positivity to get to these areas, this is where we'd really start to be like, okay, we're tapping out. We're getting people very, very extended, thinking this thing's going to new all-time highs again or something, or building back better because Microsoft's been looking a little rough, and then we just see that curl back down. So just be paying attention to lower highs is all we're talking about at these areas. And for the time being, you do have some form of 2-hour divergence, so we have to mention that. The more likely thing to happen for Microsoft, if it's going to build up to this zone, the scenario that I'm seeing, is we react to something like 417. We get to that level, then we see this curl down for a brief moment and curl back up. And all that would be is the 2-hour move goes higher, 2-hour pulls back, 2-hour goes into the zone, and then maybe around these areas we can watch out for 2-hour divergence for Microsoft. But really looks like as we hit our little buyer zone, we want to see some buyers come in. We'll see how positive it can be and see what signals form after we see this next move. Google is extremely oversold on this 2-hour MACD. Complete wipeout, right? This was a wipeout. Google really, really messed things up in the month of February, and this thing never really came back. So I think it's comeback time. I think it's time for people to see a bunch of stuff going green on the right side of your screen and then say, hey, Google's really cheap. And then we see some kind of move. The problem is if you just see that move go up to 182.59 and then you just see that resistance come in again, right? This is a very obvious breakdown area at this point. We even consolidated right before it and then dropped. So very obvious level at this point. And you even have a gap up there. So you could go up on the 2-hour, fill that gap, and completely wipe that out before you make that 2-hour divergence. And this looks like another one, another stock that is more suggesting, kind of like Tesla, that a 2-hour divergence might be necessary in these areas. Obviously, if you want this to remain positive, you are more likely wanting to take back 182.59 very rapidly, come back down into that area for a retest, and then see that head to the upside. The bearish things that you talk about here for Google, you don't really have a lot that suggests that Google is just going to completely keep collapsing. But the one thing I would be watching here is the selling is coming in pretty good for Google. You're finally getting a good buy at the end of the week. But you notice from this 30-minute, it's all on the MACD just once, very, very tight, and the RSI just very tight, and you're still far away from that center line. So if you go up to the 5 and you reject, you could still go down for another dip for Google. And this is just the one real bad thing I would be aware of for it, because if you start to curl up a 2-hour, I think you're going to see a nice move. I think you potentially could even see a test of 182.50. And I kind of want to look at if that's even possible this week real quick. Let me see. Yeah, 182.50 is definitely possible, but that is where resistance can come in. So we will be watching this area closely for Google. AMC, we really wanted this move to take us up to these levels, right? We were talking about the reversal signals here, the reversal signals on the 30-minute, and we were talking about where that could take us to, and look where we get to. We get right there, right? It's just moving based on momentum. And so we actually got a little bit higher. We went all the way to the wick, which is very, very nice. And we see this left head and potential right shoulder, and then you see this little pile up here, and the 2-hour is able to cross up. So this would be a great time for the 2-hour to continue that positivity and see some upside. That is what ultimately can reject this daily from curling to the downside. Something you really want to be aware of is if that little 30-minute starts to fail for AMC, and then you see this daily crossover, because that's where we still need to be open to that divergence being formed. Remember the divergence play we've mainly talked about with AMC. So that's what we really want to be watching at this moment. I'm going to update this line tomorrow morning during the live show. So if someone comes in and asks for AMC, just tell me to update the level that we need to break through to see something crazy. Last week it was 394. We'll see how it changes this week. GME though is saying interesting things right meow, right? GME, if it curls up this daily chart, I'm like, holy crap, that is divergence on the daily scale. This says that you can get weekly momentum behind you. You can start to see a weekly chart really curl up here, and that's kind of crazy to me, because that means we could see an extension of this overall bullish move as we're in a positive trend. So very interesting to see daily divergence. You need that to curl back above all these moving averages, and then we'll give you the key level tomorrow to break through. We noticed that the 2-hour very, very spread out, so we still want to be aware that this could make a base in the near term before it can actually curl up. And I'm more talking about a near-term burst, or base, sorry, not burst, because you do have the 2-hour divergences here. It wasn't on the RSI at the same time back then, but still saw some kind of move. We saw that the weekly expected move came in at this point. We saw that head to the downside. So we have held that divergence point, but sometimes you do want to see that little curl down to actually head back to the upside, one little fake out before this thing starts to move. So we can pay attention to the 30-minute, and if that remains positive, I think we're all good. But at this moment, the buying is not the best. So we still want to pay attention to if that rejects, right? AMC, still want to pay attention if that's curling down. If these things are curling down, they're not going up, right? We want to make sure there are confirmations of momentum to the upside. And I think the best signal to really just watch, we can look at these shorter time frames all we want, but the time to actually make a decision is pretty much when you see this daily chart actually confirm to the upside, because that's daily divergence, and usually you see a nice move with daily divergence to the upside. We talked about this yesterday. We talked about volatility giving the 2 hours. So this is the one signal that is really suggesting like, hey, new all-time highs is definitely possible. The thing I'm having trouble with is that would technically be a touch of 620, and it looks like we might be gearing up for that right away. So something I want to watch here is if this is a very quick move and then we just see this thing curl up. I believe it would be more complex. I believe we would see almost this on the opposite side of things before we see volatility rip. But the main thing is just taking it into how can we use volatility going into early parts of this week. Well, it has 2-hour divergence. That 2-hour divergence did confirm, so we're now seeing that on the MACD. We're seeing it on the RSI. We're seeing it with the reading, I guess, for the VIX, and that suggests that the daily MACD could curl down, which tells us something. It tells us that the SPY can curl up this daily MACD. The only problem I'm having with that at this point is if we see that rapid move, we just curl this up really fast, we get up to these areas, we see a complete shift and everyone goes bullish all of a sudden as we're taking out the last all-time highs, and then the SPY makes a higher high, makes a new all-time high, and the Qs actually fail that and aren't able to. We might see that little reversal signal that suggests, hey, this is actually going to get worse. And so we will be watching that throughout this week. So the main takeaway here is it looks like a lot of what we're having to talk about, at least early on in this week, is positivity. We're aware that things can rotate back down. But at this moment, is that positivity going to see something crazy for the Qs? I still think the Qs are awesome to watch here, because if you see that 2-hour move up and it crosses back down, you might need to make that 2-hour base, or you might not even make that base and keep heading down. So we're really watching this thing. We're just going to pay attention to this day by day, right? Price action is the best thing to follow at this moment. And for something like the Qs, you really want to be paying attention to price action, because all you have to do to make a reversal signal here is get some kind of bounce, get a lower high, and then end up curling to the downside, and you'll be at lower prices for the Qs. So we just want to pay attention to this move, make sure we understand how strong it is, and make sure we know, hey, this will have to make some kind of 2-hour divergence to go higher. Hey, this will have to make at least a higher low to actually head in that upward direction over time. So we're aware of those things. We're heading into the week prepared. We have levels to pay attention to, and we're ready to get going. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Really do appreciate it. I hope you guys have a fantastic Sunday. I look forward to streaming with you guys tomorrow live, and I am feeling 10 times better. So we are going to have a great live show tomorrow, and we're going to try to figure out exactly what we need to do to make money in this market. And I think the thing that we need to do is trade like water, be patient, and make sure we're managing risk. And something that we don't talk about a lot, like a ton, but understanding how to really utilize the weekly expected moves as far as taking profit will be important this week. Because if I see a 2-hour move that goes like that, it still is very likely that, well, at least more likely, right? 32% chance here, 68% chance here. So taking profit is another thing that we will tackle throughout this week if we hit a weekly expected move. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you have a good one. Peace out.